Hi, this is Mike Broder with GalaxyCon, and with me, as always, is my effervescent co-host, Patty, the Hawkman Hawkins.
Hey, GalaxyCon viewers, how are we doing tonight?
What were you? What was your Batman?
Oh, this actually belongs to my housemates. Batman 66, which, as we all know, is still the best Batman available in all the fine markets whatsoever, and all the fine multiverses. If you ask for Batman to save your universe, ask for Batman 66 by name.
I think that there's something wrong with your audio. You're like a few seconds behind. You're talking, and then it's taking a few seconds for it to get through.
Let's see. All right, folks, tell you what, I'm going to exit this real quick.
That's better.
What's that?
Now you're good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Now you're good.
All right, then. How's
all right?
I'll just be close.
We are waiting on our special guest tonight, Mr. Dan DiDio, writer, editor, publisher, 18 years with DC Comics from 2002 to 2020, where he was co-publisher for the past 10 years. He is a writer of Metal Men, Superboy, The Outsiders, OMAC, Phantom Stranger, and Sideways. And he should be with us momentarily. In fact, he
momentarily
is.
Now.
We were just reading your bio.
Let me just stick my wife in here. She's the one who figured this out. I am technically dumb. So
well, thank you, God, you married her.
She saves me every time.
Thank God.
It's so silly, I can't tell you, but it works. What can I do?
2020, we're it's all right. My wife has to figure out how all the tech stuff works for me also.
Yeah, I actually, all kidding aside, I call her in constantly for tech services for all this stuff. Which is bad. I should be learning this on my own, but if I got good help, why should I not?
Right. I mean, you've been the boss for most of your life, so you gotta you delegate.
Yeah, no, outside of this house.
So Dan, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Sorry for the delay.
No, it's fine. You literally came in right as I was just reading your bio.
Oh, that's perfect. That's great. I love a big entrance.
You made a heroic entrance. So what we normally talk about on the show is a little bit of conventions, convention experiences, fan interactions,
sure.
Kind of the fun stuff of the hobby of comic guys and celebrities and all that stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about businessy things and other things, background. But to start, what was the first convention you ever went to as a fan?
You know what? I've been doing a lot of house cleaning since we've been all in the house. I came across the very first the brochure for the very first convention I ever went to. It was called LunaCon, which was in 1970. Okay, put it in perspective. And the guest was Isaac Asimov there, and I think Len Wein. But the first convention was when I was 10 years old. It was LunaCon. That's in the days prior to the creation conventions, the Star Trek conventions, early days of the convention trail. As a matter of fact, they kept a running tally of the LunaCons over the years that they had it, and I guess they were over 1,000 people the year that I went, which was the big hurdle they finally crossed over. But it's kind of fun to see that. So I used to do that. Then they used to have what was called creation conventions, Star Trek conventions in our area, and then they had the Phil Seuling Second Sunday conventions, which really were the comic conventions of its time. So those were a lot of fun. I'm a big convention goer. I really enjoy the experience. I love getting out there and just having fun, seeing what's out for sale, hearing people talk about product, and even during the comic book days, where I went, conventions became work for me. I used to do things like on the East Coast, it was Chilla Theater and Monster Mania, and here on the West Coast, it's Monster Palooza. That's one of my great vices. I love the monster conventions.
Your T-shirt gives that away.
Yeah. I can't.
Gotta admit, it must be nice. You can actually not required to wear DC apparel anymore.
If it makes you feel any better, I was adverse to any DC apparel. It was it's funny because I had a lot of stuff. I had a lot of shirts and I always felt very weird wearing them. So I have a very odd collection of Godzilla shirts. I have probably more Godzilla shirts than probably anybody needs.
Fair. This is great. Well, yeah, Mike, talk about that. So you went into the writing side of things. You mentioned a little while ago your name is lingering on some black and white comics. What were those? Because Mike and I were very active in the black and white era as fans and readers. So what's floating around out there?
There was a company called Revolutionary. I did some work for Revolutionary under a pen name for a period of time. Okay, because they were unauthorized biographies, so I probably didn't want my name associated with the biography. They'd done there was a series of unauthorized biographies that was put out by Revolutionary. They had a separate imprint under that, and then I had done some work for them on some of their horror books.
Were those the guys that did like the Woody Allen one?
I think it was called Personality Comics. Personality. They did a lot of Star Trek ones. A lot of them based on a lot of the unauthorized biographies of the Star Trek talent and some musical talent too. I did a lot of the music ones.
Okay.
So Patty, hang on a second.
I did a comic on Paula Abdul. Okay, I have to admit. Yeah, listen, I wanted to break into business. I figured that was my big in.
there are worse things to have to research.
Yeah. So I
don't have the 70 book.
Oh, you got this 69. Holy hell, that's the year before me.
But I found the 69 book.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the first person who knew what LunaCon was.
in 69. Well, you were a Lunarian.
Yes, I was.
One of the weird thing I collect because I run conventions. I collect old program guides.
Yeah.
From conventions. So I have probably 1,000 or so convention program guides going back to 1939.
Well, if you need a 70, I got 2 of them. So if you need one.
All right.
He's gonna hit you up on that.
Because on my Lunacon, I go from 69 to 85.
Oh, there you go. Okay, well, let's see what we can do there.
And
I've actually got the creation shows, the Star Trek creation shows, 72, 70.
I think I've got all of those.
Yeah, those are a little more slick. They're a lot more fun.
First time Mike and I hung out, he was like, we were feeling each other out, and he said, "Can I show you my personal collection?" I thought he was going to show me some Silver Age, Golden Age.
Yeah.
He pulls out the magazine boxes of all these program guides, and he saw me just lose my mind because I was like, "These are the relics of our culture."
Okay. Well, you want to relics of the culture. I got into everything from my sister. My sister was hospital was in the hospital for about 7-8 years of her life with various conditions. She was on crutches, but it never slowed her down. She's the one who took me to all these shows. She was the big collector. That's the reason why I have it. I mean, the funniest part, I found it, the 70 Lunacon collection book on it. She used to be an artist as well, so she used to do a lot of sketching on them. So it's like this time stamp of that period of time, and because she did caricatures of all the people that were attending the show. So it's a beautiful thing. But if you want that collection of time, I've got a collection. She was very big into Broadway. I've got a collection of playbills that goes back to 1956 to about 1982. So
very cool,
insane shows and actors and all these things, and it's just amazing to see how many people were on Broadway and some of these shows that you might have heard about. I can't part with it. I just you can't let go of those things. You just love to have them. So it's a lot of fun.
Does she have the one for Carrie the musical?
No, that's after she passed away. Yeah, but she has it through 5th. I have the original, Superman. It's a bird. It's a plane.
Up, yeah.
So I got that. I got a bunch of crazy stuff. A lot of fun stuff.
You've seen the recording of "It's a Bird, It's a Plane."
Yes, I have.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Yes, I know. It was like one song out of the whole thing that stuck. I don't know how that came to be.
Those things were being traded around by fans and at conventions. All the bootleg guys had them. And
yeah. When you think about it, the lead was Ted Cassidy, not Ted Cassidy. What's the guy's name? Not Ted Cassidy. Jack Cassidy. Jack Cassidy was the lead, and he played like a peripheral character. Had nothing. Wasn't Superman. Wasn't Lois. He was like some other newspaper guy, and he wound up being the big draw, big star draw. So who figures? I don't know. Anyway, we're off track, I guess.
No. That's what we're about. we're just having fun here. One thing I would love to talk about a little bit is you did a stint in animation. How did you parlay into that? Going from the underground comic scene as it was.
Yeah.
How'd you get into that?
Well, it's funny. My underground comic scene was actually a side interest. What happened was I was always interested in comic books. I always wanted to be. I always read comics. Never, and I've always liked to write. So what happened was when I was working in television, I worked in various departments, but we worked in publicity for a while on the soap operas. Then I wound up in children's television, an executive on the children's television. Then from there, I worked for an animation company as a story editor, as a writer, then ultimately as their developer of new ideas and new series. And that ultimately got me into DC. So I've always had my hand in it. But even while this was all going on, I was always a comic collector. So had friends and connections in comics. When I was working publicity, I was doing, these little black and white comics over here. I was also helping Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti do publicity for event comics when they started up. Mm-hmm. So I was working doing some of that. I was doing some writing for some of the other magazines. Fred Greenberg, speaking of convention running,
yep,
to have Comic Book Week and a couple of other support magazines. I was doing writing for him on that, and I did a big piece on the Kubert School and things of that nature. So that was a lot of fun. Then I used to do, because I was friends with Jimmy Palmiotti, we used to do a lot of writing together. Came close a couple of times, both at Marvel and DC. And then ultimately we wound up on Superboy, which is still one of my favorite stories of all times, on how we got there. And it's just a lot of these things I just happened to stumble across and stumble into, just not through searching, but because the opportunity presented itself and jumped at it when it came around. So cool. Even my start at DC was by accident, not by a real search for a job or
you were on the drink and draw thing last week.
Yeah,
you told an interesting story, and I don't think Patty's heard it, about how when you were in production, the production side, you got pitched by Stan Lee.
Yes.
For some cartoons.
Yeah. I did hear this story, but by all means, you can relay it to our viewers. Yeah, it's a good one.
It was an interesting thing because I had a good, it's the first time I ever met Stan. I had the pleasure of meeting him several times, but this is the first time I met him. And he was still Marvel was still part of New World. And they had the deal with Fox Kids for shows, but the deal for Fox Kids was having a problem, so they decided to shop elsewhere. I was at ABC. So Stan comes in with the New World people to pitch a couple of cartoons, and I am over the moon about this. I can't wait, but because it's work, I have to shift into work gear. So he comes in, he starts to pitch, and he's pitching a real good pitch, explaining to me about he wants pitching Captain America and the Avengers an idea, but also we were talking about the potential. He said, I really wanted to get a Thor show off the ground, but it was hard to do. We're talking about if it works better in Asgard or on land, what works better as a kid's show. And in the middle of the pitch, my friend, my boss, leans into Stan and she goes, do you know, he was so excited to see you, he couldn't sit still all day. And almost like he's flipped the switch in Stan Lee. Stan Lee went from this guy who was speaking and giving me this really constructive explanation on why Thor could work as a children's show to a guy that turns into the Stan Lee that everybody knows.
The character, the Stan Lee character.
And he starts, and the whole meeting just went downhill from there. And it just, I was so embarrassed and so deflated. I was sitting there like, I can't believe it, because you had that moment to meet somebody that you respected so immensely and speak to them as peers, and that opportunity is just so overwhelming, and so much more for me. That's why I'm always looking, and that's why I like to talk to a lot of the fans at shows, because they remember these moments so clearly and they remember it so well. And you might not remember it, but it leaves such an impact. And one of the first things that happened to me starting at DC is when I met Dan Jurgens, and I had gone to a convention, and Dan Jurgens was at a convention. And it was when they launched Booster Gold. And I remember, I forgot what it was about, but somehow I got really at it with him at a convention from the audience about Booster Gold. How do you consider him a hero? He's stealing rings. He's doing all these things. I went into the whole.
You're not wrong.
And I'm like saying, how do you do this as a hero thing? And he was explaining to me, right? And I just remember how gracious and how pleasant and how engaged he was in the conversation. So when I meet Dan, second or third time in, I said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but I was at a show, and I explained the whole situation, and he just looks at me blankly, and goes, "Haven't a clue what you're talking about." And I said, and I'm like, "Oh man, I can understand that." Meant the world to me, meant the world to me, but he didn't remember it. So when you're at it, that's why I was ever at a show, whenever we're talking to folks, you got to remember how important it is to the people you're talking to, regardless of if you think it's crazy or you're in a rush. You can't do that. You got to remember that this is so important to them, and that's why I love conventions so much, because
I think one of
these experiences,
I think one of the great things about your tenure at DC was not only your appearances at conventions, but you did the road shows for retailers.
Mm-hmm.
You were out there on the front lines all the time. I mean, you would just grab some people, you just go, and there's two types of people that if you're in that publisher role or editor-in-chief role or chief whatever, there's the ones who are office bound and don't go out and press the flesh. You were always known as the guy who went amongst the people to preach the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I started at DC, that was my plan. Okay, I said, if you're going to go out there, we've got to engage. And I said that to Paul right off. At that point, Marvel was very aggressively engaging the fan base and out there and aggressively attacking DC in some ways, playfully, but it's there. And I said, "Come on, let's mix it up. Let's have some fun." I'm like, I love that. I love that energy that comes with it. And and Paul kept me on a real tight leash. And I always hold me, he's pulling me back like I'm like I'm on a chain there. But he kept me on a real tight leash, and rightfully so, because he says, "Know what you're talking about before you go out and speak." And so for the first 2-3 years, I was deeply ingrained in learning the systems, because quite honestly, I was an outsider at DC Comics when I came in. Everything was about promotion from within. Everything was people who came up through the ranks all the way through. And here I am coming in at a level that basically bypassed the system. So it's one thing to bypass the system. It's another thing to ignore the system, meaning that it's one thing to bypass it, but you have to understand it, understand how it works, respect it, realize what works and what doesn't work. And then as you try to change it, you change it from a base of knowledge, not from just arrogance. Because a lot of people come in going, "I'm in charge, I'm going to do it my way," without even understanding what the way was beforehand, and why it worked and why it got to where it was. And I spent a lot of time with everybody at DC finding out why they did everything. And when they hit whenever they hit the answer, it's because that's the way it's always been done. Then you go, okay, you put a check mark next to that statement and go, okay, let's explore this. Because if they're doing it just because it's the way it's been done, then we might have lost the reason for doing it, or we might not be doing it for the reason it was in the first place. So that's how I used to dissect things and pull it back together again. But part of what I said is that I want to engage. I wanted that back page to talk to the fans. I wanted all these bits and pieces to make it community, because it's the community aspect that I think separates comics from all these other mediums with our characters. And if we can't engage our fan base and make them feel like they're part of this, then ultimately we're just throwing more at them, like every other business and the other ones are $150 million movies and concepts. So, they have a much bigger budget to get in front of your face. So the only way we can beat them is by getting in there and mixing it up with everybody and being a little bit of a rabble-rouser, having some fun. And I think that's half the joy of what we're in. It's people love talking about comics. We do. So make sure you get a chance to give them a forum to speak and listen to them when they talk and have fun with them when they do talk.
That mentality was the Marvel mentality from Stan, through Shooter, I think to Joe now, where Marvel always had a guy who was out in front, during their, there are a couple of guys here and there that just were quiet, but, Stan, Shooter, always in the backs of the books, always going out, speaking of the world. At DC, it wasn't like that. Paul didn't really go out and cultivate a personality. Carmine didn't really cultivate a personality. When when Patty and I were younger, I guess it was Giordano, who I love Dick. And Dick was very, very good to me when I was starting with shows, and I always loved Dick, but he wasn't the guy going out there, preaching. Yeah. And you, I think, were the first guy at DC to really be like, no, we gotta sing this thing.
I was going to say, let me correct that 1 second. I was definitely the first guy who did that. Not the first person. Jeanette Kahn did it. Jeanette with the publishorials, and when she took on, she's all personality. You know what I mean? And she came out there and she made sure people knew that she was the new publisher in charge and that she had her fingerprints on the going there. And I remember when I'm doing my pages in the back of the DC Nation page in the back of the DC Comics, I was not doing bullpen bulletins. I was doing Jeanette's publishorials. That's what I used as my template, right. Which was much more focused as you're talking to somebody as almost like a peer in some ways, and you're promoting. You're not overhyping. You're really getting in there and talking to getting behind the scenes a little bit. Because anybody that gave me a shot of behind the scenes, I would follow them anywhere. So
I'll say one thing though. Absolutely, every show I ever saw you at, you were at the forefront, shaking hands and kissing babies. I mean, you really. Mike and I, we talked about this with all the guests we have in here before. There are guests, whatever medium or comic wise as it is, they can do the job at the tables and blah blah blah. But you're walking around, and I see people come up to you all the time. Hey Dan, what's going on with Airwave and stuff too? Hey, we're working on it. But you would stop, you would give them like I said, you gave them their moment. You absolutely gave them their moment. You thanked them, and I watched you one time, and people was coming up to you. Just if they always walked away happy, or at least satisfied that they got a real answer from you, and not a political. Hey, keep buying. We'll work on it.
Look, you know what? What the fun part was working with Jim, and this is honestly the fun part. We were completely two different personalities that complemented very nicely together. And, Jim had a lot of talent. I had no talent, so that worked out good. But Jim was also the superstar. You know what I mean? And he was a celebrity. And that's the way it was positioning. So I got to be the every guy. You know what I mean? Which is where I feel much more comfortable. I'd much rather roll up my sleeves while Jim is up on stage talking and sit in with the fans, watch him and talk about what's he talking about, and have fun with that. Because that's the experience I like walking away with. The greatest compliment I ever got from a panel, best compliment I ever got. Some fan comes at me and goes, "That's the greatest panel I ever see. You said nothing. I have no idea what it was about, but I've never had more fun in an hour of watching a panel." I said, bingo. Absolutely right. Because if I'm going to go up there and read, from a catalog, I want to kid myself. Because I used to laugh. I said, every time I said, you guys are going to come up on a panel with me, and I'm going to put you all. I used to say, everybody with me. I said, we're going to put you on the spot. The one thing you're not allowed to do is, yes, I'm working on a new book. I can't talk about it right now, but I'm really excited about it. You're going to love it. Everybody's going to love it. It's going to be the best thing we've seen for quite a while. So when it comes out, don't be surprised about how good it is, because it's the best thing I've ever done. Thanks.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen that?
And honestly, a lot of comic book talent. I mean, yeah, and it's nothing against them. It's just they're not outgoing to them. Man, you were getting them. Look, guys, you're pulling them a little bit out of their shells.
Most of these guys are writers and artists, and they're used to sitting. Comic books are a very solitary medium, right? Like these guys work from home. Many of them, they're not. They're in a book. They're drawing. They're writing. They're not. There are personable people in the industry. There are a lot. But there's also people that are not, and it's difficult for them to emote on that stage. Exactly like you said. Head down. I'm working on this thing. It's going to be the greatest thing ever.
And the other thing too, when I do panels, I know everybody on my panel. I know what they like, what they don't like. I know what their interests are. I know what they like to talk about, what they don't like to talk about. I know their funny stories that I know how to extract out of them because they tell me in private, and somehow I'm able to pull it out, and get them to tell that story on the stage. We have the infamous Keith Giffen and the Rhesus Monkey story, which is still possibly one of the greatest stories we could tell on a panel. Has nothing to do with comics. It's great. You had Emmanuel Lupacino admitting that she was a microbiologist dealing with toxic and viruses. And somehow she gets into comics. I don't know, but that's the stuff that it actually makes the fans feel better with the people because they get to know who's up there talking and and I think that makes that connection a lot stronger. I mean, I did something once, a quick story. I did something once that worked really well and really badly to show the difference between writers and artists. So I brought a bunch of writers on a panel and I said, okay, I'm not going to ask you about your book. I'm going to ask you about the guys next to your book. So you're going to talk about his book. And so the writers, they were great. They read the other guy's books and they knew stuff and they were saying this is going on and that. And it was this really fun, interesting panel about everybody talking about everybody else's work other than their own, and they would say something and the other guy go, no, that's not what I meant in the story. And, so there was this great exchange. So a couple of months later on a panel with all artists. So I get on the panel with all the artists and they're all sitting there. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I start to ask them, so what do you think of so-and-so's book? How do you like it? And the guy looks up and he goes, I don't know. I'm drawing all day. I don't get a chance to do anything except my own page. I'm like, oh, okay. Next guy. And no, I actually don't read anything. And I'm like, it was dead silence. And I'm like, this is going horribly wrong.
You're on the comp list, damn it.
You got to do that. Hang on. You got to do that panel with Brad Walker. Because Brad reads everything.
Yeah, it was just one of these. It was just this weird mixed panel that everybody. It was the most introverted group, and I thought I'd be able to pull it out of them. I got nothing. We if this was a radio show, you would have had an hour of dead air.
Oh man. So basically, I think you're an entertainer at heart, and and that's what it is, and that's the spin that you brought to DC that I think got you in the door. And again, you didn't go in there, kicking down the sandcastles, like what works, what doesn't. And you gave a vitality to your tenure that I don't think DC may ever have had. I mean, again, I know you mentioned Jeanette and everything else too. Jeanette didn't have the advantage of the internet presence and the proliferation of the convention culture and everything else. So basically, she blazed the trail, and there was just more forests that grew up by the time that you were able to walk through it.
Yeah, but there's a page of art that if I ever wanted to own one page of art, and I want to say I gotta see if I remember. It's a backup story in Fantastic Four Annual 5, and it's called "Lo, There Must Be an Ending." I believe that's the title, and it's a shot of Stan. He's not standing on a table, but he's standing on furniture with a helmet on and a sword. He's dictating the story, and the whole place is kinetic and crazy. And
he's like doing that. Hey,
yeah, he's doing that, and writer and Kirby supposedly drawing. Everything's going crazy.
Roy Thomas is in the trash can.
Yeah, exactly, writing. And I look at that page, and I said, that for me is the comics business. That is my image of comics and how they're created. And I don't care. I can work in a company for 18 years and maybe never experience that moment, and it will never change that perception for me. For me, that is how comics are made. And that energy and that excitement has to be taken out and exploded elsewhere in order for it all to work. Because we all sit here and there's a joy that comes with your first comic. There's a joy that comes with this material. Should not be this overwhelming burden. It should be this massive release of enjoyment and fun. And that's the stuff that's why I love conventions more than anything else, because that's when you see it. That's when you see people actually coming to you because they truly love the experience and the craft. And you gotta meet that with the same level of enthusiasm that they bring to you. You have to.
That was the, whatever good, better, and different about Stan Lee. That was one of the things that he brought to this industry, was this idea that the bullpen was a bunch of crazy, wacky people, and that him and Jack and Ditko and John Verbraten and all these guys, Murray Severin, were having a wild time. And they're all working from home. There's no real office, but he's creating this persona that they're all having the greatest time. And as a reader, you're like, oh my God, this has got to be the most fun job in the world.
Yep.
This has got to be the best thing. And
I bought into it too. Yeah,
I did, and that's why so many people want to take tours of these offices. They don't want to see a bunch of people and stand in front of computers because that's all it is, And but they want that tour of the office because they want to see that energy. They want to see people running through the halls with pages, screaming, and artists fixing things on the go, which we've done, by the way. But we literally, there's a couple of books we didn't have a title for until 10 minutes before it was supposed to go to catalog, and literally there's a classic on the Countdown to Infinite Crisis 80-page special we did. Literally, we had Phil Jimenez in the office designing the new interpretation of OMAC that had to go within a half hour. Or else we was going to miss everything. He was going to blow everything. And we couldn't lock the design down. And we had him in there. We're all yelling at him over the shoulder, and he's there drawing away. It's awesome.
You just mentioned OMAC, and a little while ago, Patty mentioned Airwave. You're known as, like, I guess you were a fan of some really, like, some of the obscure comics, or not like some of the more popular, you say, A-list.
I live for that. You know why? Because as a fan, I'm drawn to all the crazier stories. The crazier, the better.
Yeah.
More eclectic, the better. Something that challenges me, just shows the creativity of the people behind the scenes, or the lack of creativity behind the scenes, which is even twice as much fun, because you know what they're trying to do, but boy, did that miss. And there's something enjoyable about it. Unfortunately, I have the same taste in movies. But I love all the crazy characters, and I would rather, as a writer, as a fan, I would rather read or write a OMAC or a Phantom Stranger or Forever People or any of these crazy things than Superman. Batman is Superman and Batman. It's what you expect. There's greatness, there's a lot of fun to it, there's all that, but what gets me jazzed is having these things that aren't supposed to work really work, or overachieve. That's the big win. Some of these things you have to maintain a certain level of success on, or else you're considered a failure. The other ones are, there's no pressure to succeed, and it does succeed. It's a monster win. That's why, for me, when Tom King and Mitch Gerads did Mr. Miracle, it was fantastic. It's wonderful to see that thing, because they took risks. They tried to change it up. They did something different. They were bold. They were bold in what they were trying to accomplish. And you always got to challenge people to be bold. As much as people complain about change, they really want it. They just want good change, and ones that are consistent and make sense. The place we used to get hammered the most was when we make changes that were inconsistent with the expectations of the character. If you can make changes that seem tied to that, then you're able to be a little more successful. It's the infamous baby in bathwater, as I like to call it.
yeah. But and personally, I think history is going to be very kind to your tenure. Honestly, no, seriously, because you got on base, and yeah, there were a few things I, as a fan, was like, oh, I don't know, but honestly, I think a lot of the more stable titles, and again, you were never afraid under your watch to explore the odd corners of the DCU, even if it was just, let's throw the fantasy characters into Wonder Woman. If anything, we just got to redo the trademark stuff on them. But you had a really fearless run on that. And we
did Green Team.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
What are you thinking?
And why not? And why the hell not?
But that's my answer. Exactly. I'm going to say something that's going to sound terrible, but I guess I can say it. If there are so many important jobs in the world where if you make a mistake, they have serious consequences to what happens. And if we make a mistake, we just make another book the next month. So why wouldn't you want to take a risk? This is the places where we should be taking risks. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go into surgery and tell, hey guys, let's come up with a new technique on surgery today. But you got to. If you're in a creative business, the job is to constantly push. And my role was to basically pave the way for other people to be creative behind the scenes, to allow them to take risks. And so therefore I had to get in front of everybody and say, let me pave the way. So you guys keep on taking your chances, and we'll see what works and what doesn't work. And the last thing I ever wanted to be was custodial. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at maintaining a status quo. That's not, that's somebody else's job. Yeah.
Is there anything like that you could point out to me and say, this is a thing that I'm very proud of that people might not think of? Not like the typical, oh, this is the best thing I ever did, but something unique that nobody would ever realize that you're proud of this accomplishment.
It's hard to say, I mean, everything has its pluses and minuses, unfortunately, much like all the talent, I have the same weakness as much as my talent. You can get 100 positive reviews and 1 negative, and all you do is whine about the 1 negative, without understanding the 100 positives completely outweigh it. For me, I mean, it's what I loved is the constant. It's hard to say because I never really dwell on anything. I try to always constantly move forward. So as soon as something's done, people used to joke with me at conventions because I'm always constantly giving stuff away, talking. Because in my mind, I forget where we are in the schedule when I'm talking. I'm looking and talking about books, working on books a year out, not realizing what's out at the moment. And I'm talking about things that I've already put to bed that still haven't come out yet, as if they're 6 years old. So I kept on shifting time in my mind. So in my mind, it's like once it's done, we move on to the next thing. It's a very television, because my background's all TV before comics, and television mentality is, we'll get them next episode. We'll get them next episode. And I used to say that to the guys. We'll get them next issue. Don't worry about it. It's good enough. Go. And it's horrible to say that. It's good enough. But when you're in that type of, and I hate to use the expression, factory position, because you're constantly producing, it's a factory.
Well, you're in the hamster wheel.
Yeah. So you can't dwell. You can't overthink. And I made the expression, which I've actually, a couple of people come back to me on already, which is kind of fun. I said, art is accidental. A lot of people are out there and they're trying to craft art, something that is going to stand the test of time. But most of the things that stand the test of time weren't built that way. If you listen to Alan Moore speak about Killing Joke, he almost wants to discount it as anything less than important. And here we are holding that as the quintessential Joker story. It's certain things just happen. It's the right moment, right time, right people, right mix, right everything. And it's funny because it is a level of alchemy in comics you just don't understand. You could take the same combinations and mix them into different packages and not get the same results. And I could take the same artist, mix with the same writer, and move them onto a different character. And you think because they did something wonderful before, they'll do something wonderful again. And it's not the case. And then you could go the opposite. You get two people who could barely talk to each other, haven't turned out anything of note, and all of a sudden come together and you've got something that's beyond understanding. It's just the right character, right artist, right writer at the right moment in time, and boom, you got something that's just amazing. And Absolutely. You got a lot of things that just fall by the wayside. So when you ask me what am I proud of, I got a bookcase in my house that's full of shit I'm proud of. Everything on my bookcase is something that either tells me a good story, a bad story, and I remember all the warts and all that, but all you see on that bookshelf is something that somebody says, that's my favorite book. So they don't need to know all the stuff that went behind the scenes. They just got to know it's their favorite book. And that's the win.
What was the great lost project? Something that you really wanted and maybe got really close that just for some reason it just never made it across the finish line?
There's a couple.
Mm. You don't have to name names.
Yeah, no. Like I got it. It's funny. What I used to do is I used to pitch Paul per year. So I used to go, here's what I'd like to do this year, and send him the whole thing. Boom. And he'd go, yes, no, yes, boom, 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 and send it back. And there was one thing I wanted to do. Sent it to him, sent it back, no. Sent it back in, sent it, no. I sent it about 4 times. And I kept on pushing it to the deadline. There was one story I really wanted to tell. I'll tell the story. What the hell? I don't think I've ever said this. So when we were working on Batgirl, and this is before Stephanie Brown became Batgirl. Mm-hmm. The initial plan was to do Flowers for Algernon, I call it, with Barbara Gordon, meaning we were going to show that Barbara Gordon gets the use of her legs back, and she gets the power back in the legs, and she does all the stuff, and ultimately she realizes halfway through the story arc that she's going to lose it, and when she loses, it's going to be for good. Yeah. So now she's out there hunting for her replacements, and she proposes to Dick Grayson in a moment of panic. And Dick realizes it's a more panicked proposal and turns it down, which creates friction between the two of them. And she alienates herself and pulls back from him. And therefore, that's when she anoints Stephanie Brown. And then also we had another character we were setting up, and I think it was Wendy in Teen Titans to be the new Oracle. So she takes the two aspects of her personality and becomes the mentor for two new people to become the two people that she is. And then she was going to fade into the background. And the story, we had a team on it. We're always set to go, and just through the machinations, everybody got cold feet just about what we were trying to accomplish, and they just skipped over that whole storyline and just went to Stephanie in the suit, which I felt it was just another replacement. And already we had done several things with Stephanie Brown, which just made her feel like a replacement. So I felt like we didn't get to that really meaningful handing off of that, and probably things that you concern yourself with, I wish you can do over. There was a point of time. I'm not even going to talk about anything in particular. Point of time where we were just moving at such speed, and you feel the wheels coming off the car, the engine's overheating, it's steaming, and we're pushing it harder than we ever did before. And the problem for me was that we were moving so fast, we weren't setting up story properly. So when the stories and the changes occurred, it didn't have the same emotional impact that I had hoped for. With the change occurred, we were just so busy, so busy making the changes that you lost track of why you're making the changes, or setting it properly so that people were invested in the changes. So it's hindsight, it's everything. There's ways to do everything. Some of it stuff worked, some of the stuff didn't work. But at that same point, Blackest Night was working, so you didn't see the other stuff that wasn't working nearly as bad. But when Blackest Night ended, all the warts were exposed. And then all of a sudden we're like, where are we? And then that sort of gets you to New 52, in a weird way,
That makes sense. No, I like the notion of a new Oracle, because if anything, Oracle was always a great narrative shortcut. Rather than have to investigate things, it's like, let me get on the Oracle. You free? Can you trace this for me? Yeah.
I used to call it OnStar in the offices.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, Batman. Batman's in Batmobile. I'm the greatest detective. You know what? OnStar, Oracle, what's going on today? Who should I be going after? And she gives them the whole download. Thank you. And we move on.
Indeed.
And actually, in some ways, when you think about it, it diminishes both characters. It turns Barbara Gordon into a plot device. And basically it turns Batman into not the greatest detective, which for me is Batman. Batman for me is the greatest detective. The loss of detective stories in comics is something that I lament.
I concur. And not to say that, but short version is that I think Batman needs to be presented a little more the way we're told he is in other books. In other books, he walks in, everybody's he's the smartest man in the room. But within his own book, there's a disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the most interesting about Batman and Robin for me, in the way I used to describe it, because it's interesting if you think about it. Batman. So I used to do the joke: Batman and Robin walk into Batman and Superman. It's not Batman and Robin, Batman and Superman. So Batman and Superman walk into a bar, right? Mm-hmm. And they see Batman and everybody runs, and they see Superman and everybody pats him on the back and wants to buy him a beer. And when you think about it, the human that they could take out with a shotgun is the one they're running from. And the guy that can take down the entire building with a sneeze is the one that they're embracing. And I think that's the most fascinating aspect of both those characters, is the fact that people naturally aggregate around Superman. They feel comfortable around somebody being so supremely powerful. And Batman exists in this world of fear that makes him the most powerful character because everyone is afraid of him.
But I think Superman has worked very hard his entire life in most tellings of the character to fit in and to be, a symbol of hope, right?
Yep.
Whereas Batman has worked his entire life to be a symbol of fear.
Yeah.
And so that,
yeah. Exactly, and I think it's a fascinating thing, and that gives you great exploration for both those characters, and also when you flip the paradigms, what happens then, and it's always interesting to see, and those are the types of story you want to deal with and all that. I see questions are popping up. Should I be answering these questions?
We can. I mean, Kelsey,
Yeah.
how have you dealt with writer's block?
Right, I do GalaxyCon because I can't get onto the. Because I'm stuck on issue number 11 of Metalman right now. It's my big fight, big climax, and I'm trying to wrap up too much in one issue, so I'm stuck here.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, you climbed the mountain. You were at the top of the mountain. That you were the guy. Who in your life, in any of your previous jobs along the way, who are your mentors that kind of helped you along?
I get that asked a question or not, and the answer is I don't have a mentor. What I have is a portfolio of people, and the way I describe it is, it's fascinating because every job I take something away from everybody that I work with, and I put it into the portfolio of how I am going to manage myself moving forward. And all my jobs over the years became my portfolio for my DC job. I worked in television. I worked in station relations. I shouldn't say it. First, I started as a page. So I knew what it was like to deal with public and audiences and deal with audiences and seating audiences, keep them busy while they're bored and all these other things. So I started as a page. I worked in affiliate relations, station relations. So I knew how to deal with all the different stations and all the different needs around the world, around the country. So that was interesting. That becomes part of my store mentality. I worked in public relations. So I knew the mentality and understanding of the celebrity and of the talent and how you had to work with them and be able to get what you need from them, even if they think it's their idea. I did that. I worked in soap operas for a bit. So I learned about the structure and the pacing of storytelling. I used to sit and watch the writers break story down in there. So I learned that. I worked in children's animation. So I learned the expansiveness and the sensibilities of what went on from that. I was a story editor on a couple of animated series. I knew what it was like there. I had to raise money for shows. I had to sell shows, develop shows, pitch shows. So I did a lot of work in that sense there too. And it all becomes part of your portfolio. So when you come to your job, you're pulling out experiences that might not be the same exact one, but certainly have a lot of similarities that you have a reference point in your decision making, even if it's not a one-for-one comparison. And that becomes what's the best thing for me. And along the way, I had a lot of really wonderful people. I mean, listen, just the DC alone, between Paul, the hours I spent with Paul Levitt, him. And I'm a sponge for history. I love history. This is my chance. I've got every issue of Comics Journal, Amazing Heroes, Comics Reader, all these magazines, Comics Buyer's Guide, all the magazines with all the backstories and the snapshot of what's really happening in comics. And then I go into Paul and he tells me the story behind the story. And I'm like, oh, this is the world of fun worlds for me. If I left with just that information, the job was worthwhile for me, And then I got a chance to sit down with Julie Schwartz, and I got a chance to spend some time with him. Dick Giordano had a chance to spend time with him. Paul made sure I met a chance to sit down with these guys. The person who probably was my unofficial mentor would probably be Len Wein, okay? Now that I get around to it. Len, oddly, as the worlds would work it, his aunt was friends with my sister. I spoke to him as a 13, 14-year-old, got on the phone, wanted to know the secrets of comics. He said, don't get into it. It'll break your heart, kid. Exact words. Meet him again. I'm working in children's television, so I get my revenge. I hire him. I hire Marv. I hire a bunch of people. I did. In children's, when I was working at ABC Children's, I developed Thunder Agents as an animated series. I developed Metalman as an animated series. I was working. Yeah. I was working. Louise Simonson, Tom Grummett did development for me. for Metal Men back when. That was some of the stuff was beautiful. No, I'm sorry. Tom did Thunder Agents. Never mind. I forgot who did the art on. I think Luis did the Bible for Metal Men. Then moved over to Warner Brothers Studios, and Marv and Tom did Thunder Agents, and that was a lot of fun. And then I worked with Len on some other work. Then when I was actually doing work as a story editor, I hired Marv and Len as writers for me. So that was good. Tried to hire Steve Gerber, but the studio wouldn't let me. I guess they had history, as the expression goes.
Well, he made his own history.
Yeah.
I have a hardcover Howard the Duck right over there. I love the man.
No. Listen,
but I've heard the stories.
Steve it was interesting because I got a chance to work to Steve up until he passed. You know, he was doing Hard Time, and
yes,
he was one of the guys that I desperately wanted to work with. There was six. Strangely, there was six writers I always wanted to work with in comics, and I worked with five of the six.
Who were they?
It's Len Weave, Marv Wolfman, Steve Eamon, Steve Gerber, Jerry Conway, and Roy Thomas.
Who didn't you work with?
Didn't work with Roy. We just never clicked. We were able to click on a project, which is a shame for me because I think Roy Thomas is probably one of the greatest unsung heroes in comics, and probably one of the greatest comic engines, bar none. I think the best single run on any character anybody has ever done in comics is Roy Thomas and Conan the Barbarian, and I will challenge anyone to beat me on that one. You know, I think that is the best run of comics ever. I don't know how anybody else could even write that character after everything he's done on it. Okay. Just my opinion.
No, that's a very good measure. That's a very good measure for a definitive run for a character.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's just stuff like that. I'm a huge fan of, and there's a lot of stuff in there that a lot of guys, and like I said, I got a chance, and they got a chance to work with some of the guys on the DC side. What was interesting is I had a chance to. I always try to find ways to really, any chance I could, to get some of the guys that were involved in DC's history to get back into it, and we were able to bring guys in. After Julie Schwartz passed, we did a bunch of books with Julie Schwartz Presents, and we brought a lot of the old guys back, older talent back to do that. We did the retro comics when we were moving into when was that? Was that the New 52? I don't know, one of the two. Maybe the New 52.
Those Convergence books, right?
No, it was before that. We did a series of books. They were called Retro 60, 50,
oh, 70, yes. That was in between.
Yeah, it was. I needed to fill the gap of product. So we did a lot of that stuff. So we did a lot of that. Any chance I got to revisit, and you want to pay tribute to the people that really got you. You
liked working with our mutual friend Keith Giffen.
Well, Keith is possibly. Keith Giffen was the first talent I met as a DC employee. He stuck his head in my doorway. It's brand new. Month in the job, month and a half.
So get out.
He did, exactly. Run as fast as you can. Keep running. Don't look back. Get out of here. It will kill you. And left. And we've been friends since.
Well, I think it's killed him twice now. So
yeah.
Got through that, Keith. I was like, get out of here. Get out of here now.
Yeah.
I got a chance. Go.
Listen, Keith was one of my cornerstones for when we did the 52 weekly series.
Yes.
Again, so much was on the talent, but he was the glue that kept the thing moving all the way through. The writers were amazing, but Keith doing the storyboards and ultimately was the authority figure behind the scenes, making sure that everybody stayed on track. It was valuable because everybody had a lot of respect for each other in that room. But my funny OMAC story with Keith Giffen. So Keith and I work very loosey-goosey. So I give him an outline, he gives me something back, and I write whatever he gives me. So it was a lot of fun because it's almost like, well, what's this about? So there was one issue that I really wanted to be perfect, right? I wanted to be perfect. So I'm like, I did more detailed outline, more than anything before. I call him up. I said, Keith, this is the one. I said, you just got to stick as close to what I put together. This is so tight and dense. You got to make it work. And he goes, sure, Dan, no problem. Comes back to me. He goes, listen, I got what you got. I only made one change, but I think you'll like it. And I said, what's your one change? He goes, I added a 7-page fight scene between Superman and OMAC at the opening. And I'm like, what? You what? I'm like, what did you cut out? What did you destroy? I'm apoplectic. I'm like, this was brilliant. How do you mess with it? So basically, he hands it back to me, and the son of a bitch got my 20 pages into those 13 perfectly. Did not miss a beat, did not compromise a scene, anything. So meanwhile, I got this 7-page fight scene opening up there, and it's Superman versus OMAC, and I call him back. I said, okay, you got it all right. Can you explain to me what's happening, what's going on in the fight scene? He goes, you're the writer. You figure it out. And he hangs up the phone.
If it was anybody other than Keith Giffen, I wouldn't believe you.
And I'm like, sure. That's the way this world of ours works. You know that, right? And that's the fun stuff. You know what I mean? That's the fun stuff.
I think
Keith asked about writer-artist combo. Wow, that's a tough question. That's a tough question. You know, there's a lot of guys that I like. You know, and it's you know, I'm just not good at picking favorites because I like so much. I got 80 some on loan boxes of what I like, you know, and if I didn't like it, I wouldn't hold on to it. That's the thing, you know. I mean, there's some things I like some things more than others, but I love so much. I love so much what we do. You know, for DC, for me, for artist wise, I was a big Jim Aparo fan, and I'd love to say I really like Jim Aparo and Bob Haney because they're just so freaking crazy. I don't know what to say sometimes. I think
people talk about how Bob Haney's books take place on like this alternate Earth.
Oh, I don't know. That's giving
no way
a reference. I don't even know if that's a reference point.
Right, so there's no way you could make like Batman hanging out with Sergeant Rock.
I love that stuff. And Jim Aparo drawing he has to draw himself out of it, so he's in trouble and he's trying. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I'm like, but it looks beautiful. You know, it's funny. I was just talking about. My issue of Metal Men. I actually refer to one of those issues. There's Tina's playing with this little kid, and she goes, remind me to tell you about the time I saved Batman when he's tied to the front of a train. And I'm like, because it was a Brave and Bold with the Metal Men that I just remember. That's all. And you know what?
That was my first exposure to the Metal Men. That where they hijack the train that has the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But of course they would take them on tour, right?
Exactly. It was at 76. You got to take things on tour.
I discovered Haiti a little bit later on, but just a madman. And thanks to those the big showcases that put up under your the black and white phone books. Yeah. You did like his run on Metamorpho, which I have sitting over there.
Yeah,
brilliant stuff.
I'll tell you, you look at some of this stuff and you're just going, what were they thinking? You know, and but you know what? That's why I adore it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's like I literally said, what were you thinking? And part of me goes, why can't I think like that? I want to be a writer. How are they getting so crazy? And where are we going? And how are they taking me all these places and all these weird ideas? I mean, you know, you look at Dial H for Hero. I mean, one of my favorite characters is Eclipso. That's another one that's just so much fun. I don't know what to say because they're wildly inconsistent, and that's also kind of interesting to me. I don't know why. It is.
And I thank you for that, because there's a tendency, I think, in modern comics to kind of poo-poo the older stuff or whatever, but you embraced it under your tenure. And any chance you had, you say like, hey, let's do a retro book here. Let's do it there.
Well, what's great about comics is, unlike any other mediums, you could get away with anything.
Yeah,
you can go wacky, you could go absurd, and there's a place for comedy, there's a place for horror, there's a place for, you know, your superheroes in tights, and there's a place for everything. You know, I mean, the audience is, you know, what the audience is. It's more harder now, but
the audience is it's, you know, that's the thing. We gotta learn how to pass it on and enjoy what we had, but understand that it's got to move, it's got to evolve, it's got to change, it's got to grow. Yeah. It's got to be. You know, I tell the story again. I love, you know, I have a story for everything, as you probably noticed already. But I used to tell a story about my kids, right? And there was a moment in my house. I'm going upstairs, and my kids are up there. They're listening to music really loud. I go upstairs. They turn the music down, And I said, what'd you turn it down for? He goes, Dad, you really can't be listening to these lyrics. And they were trying to protect me from the music, and we are so desperate to get children to enjoy what we loved. And that's just part of who we are. But on the other side, they need to find what's theirs. And again, the most intriguing thing I can say about comics to date, the most intriguing thing is we all wear this badge of courage. My mother I used to have that comic, but my mother made me throw that because she thought it was bad for me. Imagine if I still had those comics, And now the mothers and fathers are reading the comics to the kids, wanting them to do it. It's a complete reversal. So what we had was something that was unique to us, that was almost forbidden, that we wanted to own, control, and possess. And now our parents were trying to take away from us, which made us hold on to it twice as hard. And now our parents are trying to hand it to us, to the kids. And the kids are embracing it in places, but I still think the kids have to find what's theirs.
Well, on that subject, I have two questions. I'll get there. I think the kids have found what they like. It's called manga.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Manga sells an insane amount of units each month, and it's comic books. It's just it's a different form of comics. And I think you guys were branching out more into the young adult, graphic novels to get after that audience. And I think there was some success there.
Yep.
I mean, the average person in a comic store doesn't know who Raina Telgemeier is.
Right.
But in the real world, she's outselling Batman and Superman.
Exactly.
And she's making comics.
She's the J.K. Rowling of comics.
Right. So I think the kids are finding comics, but I think that we, the old men, we like the comics in the way that we like them, in the packaging we like them, but the young people are finding them in their own way.
Yep. And we need to adapt. And I mean, that's why I said this is an interesting moment in time. This should be a level of reflection, not just about how do we get through this time, but also who are we when this is over. If you're going to flip the switch and think that everything was the same that it was when everything stopped and it's going to start up again exactly where it was, I'm not sure if that works. I don't know. We'll see.
We're all going to die out, right? We're dinosaurs, and so I think.
This is a terrible story. I'm sorry. What the hell? I see now I can do my bad stories. So when I first started at DC Comics, true story, started at DC Comics, and I went to about conventions. Go back to conventions. So I go to WonderCon. It's one of my first shows. It's still in Oakland. Last year in Oakland.
Yep.
When I started. So I'm in Oakland. I go to a panel. Had 7 of our best writers on stage, and I mean best writers. 7 of our best writers. Maybe 40 people in the audience, maybe, of a room that holds 500 scattered about. And I'm sitting there going, oh, this is because I was really into conventions. I really wanted to go in there and pound that pulpit. So I wanted to know what our convention presence was. So I'm seeing this. And so I'm sitting there going, and these guys, every question to that panel was about archives. Every question. Are you going to collect this in archives? Are you going to collect this in archives? Are you going to collect that in archives? And then the one person asked the question that sent a chill down my spine. And he goes, are you going to finish collecting All-Star Comics? Remember we were doing All-Star Comics, the collection, before I die? He said that. And I said to myself, holy shit, our audience is going to die and there's nobody else in this room. And that's when I go, okay, we got to get younger. We got to get bolder. We got to get more aggressive. We got to be something different, but we are certainly not going to be what we are right now. And that was the start, and the hard part about change is that you get the sense that you got to constantly keep on doing it and you got to pace yourself. And you got to figure it out, and some places we paced ourselves well, and that's when it worked. And when we didn't pace ourselves well, it didn't work as well because there is a rhythm to this on how this all works. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm a comic book fan since I'm a child. Been reading comics my whole life. I own comic book stores. I was Overstreet advisor. The price cut at a certain point in time in my life. I love comics. I run these shows now, and like yourself, I think one of the great things about your resume is that you had real world experience outside of comics and then came into it having worked in the real world.
Yeah.
And so we've been, I have this very successful convention business with, tens of thousands of people. You just went to Minneapolis and that was a first-time show, and we had 19,000 people there.
Right.
Which, the Miami show was a much bigger show. The Raleigh show, we're clocking in 40. Last year we had 40,000 unique adults. Now, of those 40,000 people, how many people are reading comics? And it kills me that I could bring in the biggest comic book guys in the world,
right?
But the lines for the voice actors are going to dwarf them. And what you said about the panels, I'm going to have panels with guys who I think are legends that, I'm drooling of the thought of that panel happening. And like you said, it's going to have 20, 40 people in it, whereas the panel with the Green Power Ranger is going to have 2,000.
Right.
And yes, the industry has to shift because we are going to die out, exactly what you said. And I think one of the biggest problems is that digital hasn't delivered the way we all hoped.
Right.
And that we're not seeing the digital sales, the digital conversion that we all thought would save the industry. Mm-hmm. And I think, the young adult stuff is the only
might be where it's right. But we have to see. I mean, on the digital side, one of the things I have to say is, and unfortunately, I got to put a business hat on for a second. What we've done is we've curated down our fan base to a very strong collector fan base, meaning that's one of we've shorthanded our storytelling. We are into just amalgams and changes of everything. Everything that breaks right now is things that are new interpretations of things that are people familiar with, and we're not even reinforcing what the base is anymore. We're just going with the changes and the mashing of concepts and ideas together, because people are so familiar with the base idea that they just want to see variations of it, not continuations of it. And then you push it down to the collector's market and to the speculator market, and the service of that in the variant covers, and the collectability of those things, and the collectability of what books they are. And what we've done is we've narrowed this audience base to a type of product that is really not inviting to new people. It's impenetrable in places. And not impenetrable in a way like people might say Crisis on Infinite Earths is impenetrable, because there was a charm to that. So much stuff was happening, but they took the time to explain the important moments and not. When I look at a comic and I see 500 characters standing shoulder to shoulder, staring forward blankly, homogeneously, everything's lost its sensibility, its personality, its individuality. And I use this expression, we read comics with frog DNA. Okay, and what that means, if you're a fan of Jurassic Park, what I mean is that we fill in the blanks that are not on the pages, that are not being told or shown, because we know these characters so well. So when we read a book, we know how why he's doing certain things, because we know the past history of that character and how he acts and behaves. So therefore, what he's doing may make sense to me, but for a new reader, this makes absolutely no sense. And it's not inviting, and I don't know what he's about, and I don't know what the motivations is. I had a great moment when I was talking to a fan, and I said, yeah, I love to do origin stories. It says, oh, not another origin story. You did one 20 years ago.
Right.
20 years ago, you're right. Because to our fan base, 20 years ago is yesterday. Because they remember these books like it was yesterday. And
we need those 10-year-olds.
Yes. You forget. That's what I said. We all started 10, 12, 13. Now people are picking up the books for the first time. 22, 25, 35. It's a different sensibility, it's distant sense.
Indeed, because when I think of Crisis on Infinite Earths and I think of Supergirl dead in the cover, I think of it as charming as well.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of weird. You got to, and by the way,
not
also,
Mike though. Mike's a big Supergirl mark. So
yeah. Let's even be more honest.
But
the hell out of the death of Supergirl. We knew about that months in advance. That certainly didn't hurt that book. And everything is now so precious. We don't want to even reveal like anything until the last minute. Remember, it's going to be a really great, exciting book. You're going to be excited when you get it. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to hear you read it.
But you're absolutely right though about the cultivation. About in our, I call us the direct market generation. We didn't necessarily put the comic book stores in. We didn't create them, but when Mike and I were at the age we should have been aging out of the spinner racks, the direct market locked us in and made us lifers.
Yeah, and the other thing too about digital, and there's a mistaken arrogance that we have that one size fits all, because we've gone from periodicals into collections without much revision to material, that we believe that anything works in any format, and that's not true. And if you're working in the digital format, you have to understand the format. You understand how people read in that format. You have to understand who's reading in that format, and you should create story for those people rather than thinking that what you create in a periodical that will be done in a trade, that will be read as a 200, 300, 400-page book is acceptable as a digital read. If you're just doing digital book as just page turns on a screen, there's no appeal there. You know?
I was very disappointed that motion comics didn't succeed better.
Yeah, I think motion comics was a waste, personally. As an animation guy, that's neither fish nor fowl. It's not a comic book. It's not an animated series. What is it? It's nothing's worse, in my opinion, than somebody pacing out your reading. Everybody reads at a different speed, at a different place, and all that. And if something's trying to pace you for that, then it's got to be engaging in a way that motion comics wasn't. You know,
how was the Walmart experiment going?
It's been interesting. I mean, now since I'm not part of it, I mean, the start of it was a very particular one. The goal was to create accessible material and reprint material that allowed us to see if there's any casual fans that might pick things up because of awareness through other media. That was the purpose, And for me, I used to call it the barbershop comic. It's the comic that you read in the, how did I get into DC and DC, not Marvel, DC. 80-page giants, world's finest, Superman, Batman, 80 pages, sitting there on the shelf, 25 cents. I'm there thumbing through it, waiting to get my hair cut. Yes, I did used to get my hair cut at a point. Hasn't been there for a while. That's maybe why those comics don't sell anymore. I don't know.
Look, the first books I remember getting were the Whitman Sample packs.
Yeah.
That my grandmother would get in the 5 and dime. The 3 books, 3 comics for,
And I think they'll get back to that at some point. I think they're still doing. I think Walmart was still doing it with Marvel at the time. I just like giants. I like a big book. I used to buy Marvel Tales or collector's item classics or every annual or when Jeanette and DC did the dollar comics, I was all over those things like no business. I bought every one of them. It was twice as expensive or 3 times expensive than anything else I was buying.
Oh, Jeanette had such a brilliant plan.
Yeah,
it got yanked out from under her.
Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff they were planning to do in those days, and then you get the implosion and everything goes to hell. And then they're fighting for survival, and then crisis comes, and then the direct market comes, and now we got our feet back on the ground again.
What was the first comic you ever read that you remember?
Okay, so since I've been going through all my old comics, and I actually have a lot of old comics, first 2 comics I ever read. I have a copy of the Flintstones at the World's Fair in 1964. That might be my first comic. I have a Classics Illustrated of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was possibly my favorite childhood book. So I have that. Superhero-wise, that's an easy one. Because you know what? You have databases now you can find out. Yeah. And lo and behold, the 2 first comics that I ever had, I think came out in the same month. So it's Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 40, Spidey Saves the Day, which is possibly my favorite comic of all time.
Wow. Yeah.
And because this is my first, not because it's my first, it's just I love the visual from that.
Is a great book.
Yeah, it's stunning. And John Romita is possibly my favorite artist of all time. The other one was Batman, which was the introduction, I believe, of Poison Ivy. I believe first Poison Ivy was my very first Batman book. And I relegate both those purchases to the Spider-Man cartoon and the Batman TV show. That's what got me to buy those books.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then after that, I collect everything. After that, I was not a superhero guy. Everything was about monster comics. I bought every monster: House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Tales of the Unexpected, Ghosts, Where Monsters Dwell, Creatures, Where Creatures on the Loose, Monsters on the Prowl, all that stuff. I love that stuff.
Did you stick with it during Marvel's 70s horror phase?
Oh man, I have every single thing. That is my super sweet spot. Tomb of Dracula, Werewolf by Night.
I'm a huge Tomb of Dracula fan. That's what made me a Werewolf fan.
That's some of the finest work Marv and Gene Colan together. Bro, those, talk about creative teams that are wonderful together. That's a great creative team, man. And by the way, that's
still
a great
criminally underrated.
Yeah, I mean, amazing work they did. Even Night Force, I love that book. But I got all those. I got the Werewolf by Night. I got the early Ghost Riders. I was a Man Thing. Again, go back to Steve Gerber. Man Thing's a fabulous book. Their monster stuff was just anything with Mike Plug. Mike Plug drew it. I bought it. I just did. And then you get into my sci-fi world with anything Starlin did. I bought that. I just was a big Jim Starlin fan. I'm really excited by his Kickstarter, which Red Star. It's kind of fun. So jumping into that one.
I'm very excited about that. I just gotten the 3 hardcovers.
Yeah. I have it all from Epic Illustrated all the way through. Yeah, through all the incarnations, through Epic and First and wherever else it was in the day.
I'm in the minority when I always say, like, what's your favorite Jim Starlin thing? I'm like, Gilgamesh 2.
That's weird. Okay, sure.
I just don't. Well, the death of Captain Marvel was first, but then Gilgamesh.
Yeah, the Warlock stuff's it's pretty trippy. It's a lot of fun, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe as a kid, it made me feel older and smarter.
Hey, anything that evokes the emotion, that's the core of entertainment.
I just felt smarter reading these books. I don't know why.
There's nothing wrong with that. Go ahead, Mike.
Did your sister read comics?
No, she was Famous Monsters of Filmland. That's what she collected. My brother.
So that's where your love of monsters comes from.
Oh yeah, big time. When she was in the hospital, she corresponded with John Zachary, who was the host, Roland, the host in Philadelphia and New York for a period of time.
Well, and also, I've cosplayed as Zachary. I know.
Yeah, there you go. I've got pictures with him. We got family photos with him. Nice. And I think that's why I became a big fan of Svengoolie and friends with Svengoolie over the years here. And also she was friends with Forrest J. Ackerman. And as a 10-year-old, I got to meet Forrest J. Ackerman and got to wear. He actually let me wear the Dracula signet ring, which he was wearing, and he let me as a kid. And this is no selfies in those days, guys. Never got a picture of that, but still remember the fact that I got a chance to wear Dracula's signet ring when I was 10 years old.
Did you ever tour the Acker Mansion?
Never made it.
Neither did I, unfortunately.
Never did. I never got there in time. I used to hear stories about it. That's the only time got a chance to meet him in person. Got a chance to meet Ray Bradbury, which was wonderful.
Nice.
Really wonderful.
Nice.
And that was kind of a moment. And I missed Ray Harryhausen, that's my trifecta in a weird way. We were in when I was working at Mainframe Computer Animation Company. Harryhausen did a tour of the studio when I wasn't there, and I didn't know what was happening, or else I would have flew on my own money to go there, and I missed it. But probably better I didn't, because supposedly he hated computer animation immensely, and didn't take kindly to any of the stuff. But the entire studio was in awe of him, and rightfully so. So
here's a crazy one I'm gonna throw at you. I am a huge Prisoner fan. So,
okay.
And that's, I heard about Reboot after the fact when the word got through the grapevine. They did a Prisoner episode. What? Yeah. What are you talking about? And then it took me years to track it down. But how did that come about? And did McGowan ever hear anything about it?
No, I don't think he ever did. I think we tried to get in touch with him to do the voice, and we never were able to connect. How it came about was through the wrongest of reasons. I was story editing the series at the time, and a script came in that was so unproducible, I had to throw it out. We were doing it, oddly, a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea riff that we just could not technically pull off. So I had to throw the entire script out. I was behind time and over budget. Mm-hmm. So if you watch that episode, the game was mainframe. The idea that he entered into the game, and therefore that's the whole. He was in this loop, in this trap. So what I did is I found a way to reuse old sets and old things as a cost cutting measure. So we wound up using everything that we already had in order to save money on it, and ultimately we wound up making doing the script, and we were doing all these bad golf jokes in it, and it's just a very silly script. And we wound up writing that script in about 2 days because we were really behind it, and I never forgot because.
Well, in a bit of irony, that's how long it took McGowan to write Fallout, the final episode of The Prisoner.
Really? Yeah.
He locked himself away in his trailer for 2 days and didn't come out and said, "All right, we're going to film this."
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "What?" So
yeah, it was a lot of fun, and the probably some of my best work experiences at Mainframe. Some of the best people I ever worked with, some of the most infinitely creative people I've ever worked with in my life were in that studio on every level, from the producers to the animators to the executive. Everybody was just. It's just every once in a while you work in a place that's magic. That was magic to me.
Right on. So, what's you got any ideas on the future?
Yeah, I was planning to take a couple of months off and travel and spend some time at home. Got half of it right. So, I don't know. It's kind of intriguing to me right now. I've said it out loud before. I'll say it again. Got a little bit of an animation bug back. It's kind of intriguing to me. So I've been doing some work in making some motions in that area over the last month or so. So that's been fun. I'm actually enjoying the time down. We're running full speed for 18 years. So it's a little difficult to slow down, but it's kind of enjoyable when you do. So you might as well make the most of it. It's not the best of circumstances as everything going on around us, but I got a chance to rebox my comics. I got a chance to redo, and if it gets really bad, I think it lasts really long. I got a whole wall full of models just waiting to get built. So,
okay, what kind of models?
Oh, you're kidding me, right? You know them all. It's all the old Aurora models. I got every.
Okay,
the Auroras.
I have a lot of the originals. I have a lot of the knockoffs. I'm going to build the knockoffs, leave the originals in the boxes. I got the comic scenes. I've been trying to collect the prehistoric scenes. That's been a little difficult. I still have my monster scenes from when I was a kid, and they got all the new ones on it. So I'm just refilling that set there. I got a Nautilus I'm dying to build. I just bought the last one I bought. I said my last non-essential purchase before we got locked away. I bought a Gorgo model. So I got to do Gorgo. Ooh. That's next.
Nice. Every time I think of Aurora, I always think of the one-page comic ad where Vampirella and the mad scientist go and kidnap the girl.
The monster scenes one. Yeah, I remember the one with the boxes. I guess I call it the Alan Moore ad now because it was 9 boxes with all the different monsters in it. And it was the frightening lightning days. So it was awesome.
Very true. Very true. Very true. So, when you look back on it, again, you were in the trenches and you were out there, and if you wanted to meet everybody, you wanted to hear what everybody had to say. At a convention, is there a moment you had with a fan that really resonates with you and that's really stuck with you and it's going to stick with you as you go on?
It's a lot of the kid moments when the kids come up dressed up and they talk to you. There's 1 or 2 kids that I met along the way that had such in-depth knowledge. I was stunned on how they knew. And then I stopped and thought, wait a minute, they're 10, 12 years old. I was that kid. You know what I mean? They know as much about comics as I knew about comics. They just happen to know the stuff that when they're younger. And I'm like, it was this weird disconnect because you're always arguing with people either your age or in the 30s or 40s. And here I am with a 10, 12-year-old, and this kid is correcting me. And I forgot what it was. It was a Wally West thing. And boy, he just would not relent. He had every answer to every dodge I gave him, and so it's this great moment. And it's a classic. It's one of my favorite moments. So there's this little kid. He asked me a Wally West question, and I'm dodging the bullet in my best form. If I had tap shoes on, I would have been up there, hat and cane, doing the whole thing. And I give a good 3-4 minute answer. I think it's heartfelt. It's all this. And I finish it. And he said, and the kid stands there at the mic, and I'm like, you're still standing? He says, yes. And I go, do you have another question? And he goes, you didn't answer my first one. I'm like, oh. So what do I do naturally? I said, you're coming up on stage with me. And I had the kid sit next to me. And every time somebody asked a question that I couldn't answer, I turned to the kid for him to give an answer to it. And he gave
great.
We had like a fun little answer worked out every time. And it was just one of those moments that was just a hoot.
That's awesome. So it's the cosplayers.
Yeah, well, there's a cosplay. The cosplayers are always interesting. I always like to bring them up because that level of dedication is spectacular. There's some cosplayers that don't know the characters, which is kind of interesting. But the ones who do dress up the characters because they love that character, oh God, is that fun!
That was the first time I met you, and we have a picture of that. Steve, you want to show it on up? And you asked to take a picture with me when you saw me in this. So
which one? Okay, which one?
Steve's gonna pull it up.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. Oh, here we go.
Oh, there you go.
my Frederick Wortham cosplay as I go around with a copy of Seduction of the Innocent.
Please,
is that a MegaCon?
That
was I think that was a MegaCon. Several years ago.
It's early on because you know what I did later on. And if you know this, there's a trick I have in case I'm gonna give you my little convention trick. What I did is there's certain cities I hit in the conventions. I went out. I was up at Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame, and I bought hats from every city that I go to conventions in. So what I would do is I would go to the convention wearing the hat of the team that plays in that city. So I always could recognize where I was in the picture. So that way I pretended like I remembered it because I remember, oh, that's Chicago, isn't it? And it's because I'm wearing the Chicago hat or something like that. So I see the Superman hat. I'm like, I don't know where that is.
Well, I can tell by the badge.
What?
Yeah, tell by the badge. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the badge, exactly. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, but that's so fun. I like to do it by the hats. Because when I'm on the panels or something like that, it's kind of fun.
Well, Orlando doesn't have any teams, so it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can wear a Mickey Mouse hat. That would give it away.
That's true. All right, Stevie, get rid of that. I don't want people to see how much weight I've gained.
All right. So, Dan, I think we've kept you long enough.
No, that's fine. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. A lot of fun.
Wrap up, and if you could stick around a moment, we'll go backstage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. The casting couch. Everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Mike, what's coming up next week that we can talk about?
Oh, what do I know? Monday is Brett Iwan, the voice of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Ashley Eckstein from her universe, and the voice of Ashoka. Is that how you say it in Star Wars? Ahsoka. There you go. And Tuesday, Kenny James, Bowser, voice of Bowser with Bob West, Barney. And next Friday, we've got Bill Jemis, my friend Bill. And we're trying to put together a show. And I don't know what else I got.
Well, then the weekend after that, we have
hang on. Monday is Chris Jericho.
Yes.
I'm getting corrected. Monday is Chris Jericho. Heather's got a show on Monday with Chris Jericho and Joey Fatone. That's right. Chris Jericho, Joey Fatone with Heather. Tuesday, I'm doing Brett and Ashley. Wednesday, I'm doing Wednesday, I'm doing we're doing Kenny and what I say? Oh, Bob West.
Bob West.
Thursday's Mark Guggenheim.
Yes.
CW. Mm-hmm. And Friday is Bill Jones.
Okay. Indeed. And then we'll have the weekend after that, we have our big special interactions, and definitely hit us up at GalaxyCon live and all our social media and hear about that. So we got some good stuff coming up. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Absolutely. Understand this. We're fans of you, bro. And we're really, really going to be excited to whatever project you tackle next. And if absolutely, again, I think history is going to be kind to your tenure, and thank you for everything that you've done, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. A lot of fun.
Hang on for 1 second.
Okay.
Steve's going to run a video, and we'll be out of here.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thanks again for tuning in to GalaxyCon Live. Make sure to check out our online store at galaxycon.myshopify.com, where you can find t-shirts, signed and certified Funko Pops, autographs, collectibles, and more. For updates on the upcoming streams, visit us on Facebook at GalaxyCon Live or galaxycon.com.